The last stand. The screams echoed through the corridors of Station Omega-7 as another species fell to their knees before the Crimson Queen. Lisa Rodriguez pressed herself against the cold metal wall, watching in horror as the proud Zephyrian warriors, beings who had never known defeat in 1,000 years of conquest, fled like terrified children from the approaching darkness. Queen Cythara emerged from the shadows like a nightmare given form. Her pale, ethereal beauty was a cruel mockery of life itself, and the crimson veins that pulsed beneath her translucent skin seemed to glow with malevolent hunger. Where her feet touched the deck plating, frost spread in intricate patterns and the air itself seemed to recoil from her presence. "Run, little mortals," she purred, her voice carrying the weight of dying stars. "Your fear makes the harvest so much sweeter." The evacuation alarms wailed as species after species abandoned the station. The mighty Carathians, whose battle claws could tear through starship hulls, stumbled over themselves in their haste to reach the escape pods. The Velthari collective mind, which had coordinated the defense of entire sectors, dissolved into panicked chaos as individual members broke ranks and fled. Even the Etherians, beings of pure energy who claimed to have transcended physical fear, dimmed to barely visible wisps as they phased through bulkheads in their desperation to escape. Lisa watched Captain Dextar of the Rigelian fleet, a warrior who had faced down entire armadas, throw down his plasma rifle and sprint for the nearest airlock. His 6 legs carried him faster than she'd ever seen him move, leaving behind a trail of luminescent sweat that marked his terror. The station's population of 3 million beings had dwindled to perhaps a few thousand in mere hours. And still, Queen Cythara hadn't even begun to feed in earnest. "Fascinating," she mused, stepping delicately over the abandoned weapons and personal belongings scattered across the deck. "In all my millennia of existence across 100,000 worlds, the response is always the same. Run, hide, beg, submit." Her ancient eyes, older than most civilizations, scanned the empty corridors with amused contempt. "I had hoped this galactic coalition might prove more entertaining. But you're all the same, aren't you? Different shapes, different colors, but the same weak hearts beating with the same pathetic fears." Lisa's hand tightened around the plasma carbine she'd salvaged from a fallen Carathian guard. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear, but with something else entirely. Something that seemed to burn in her chest like a small, defiant star. She stepped out from behind the corner. "Not all of us." Queen Cythara paused, her head tilting with predatory curiosity. A slow smile spread across her perfect features, revealing fangs that gleamed like polished obsidian. "Oh? And what have we here? A human, isn't it? I had thought your kind already extinct. The Great War of Terran independence was, how long ago now? 2 centuries? 237 years, Lisa replied steadily, raising her weapon. "And we're still here." The Queen laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes being shattered by hurricane winds. "One little human thinks to stand against Cythara the Undying? Child, I have consumed the life force of entire star systems. I have watched civilizations rise and fall like waves upon a shore. What could you possibly hope to accomplish?" Lisa's finger found the trigger. "Probably nothing, but that's not the point." "Oh?" The Queen took a step closer and the temperature in the corridor plummeted. Ice began forming on Lisa's breath and the metal deck groaned under the sudden thermal stress. "Then please, enlighten me. What is the point of this gesture?" "The point," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the supernatural cold that made her muscles ache, "is that somebody has to stand up, somebody has to try. That's what humans do. We don't run because something is impossible. We don't give up because the odds are bad. We stand up and we fight even when we know we're going to lose." She pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt struck Queen Cythara's center mass, and for just an instant genuine surprise flickered across her ancient features. The energy dispersed harmlessly across her form, but she touched the spot where it had hit, as if she couldn't quite believe someone had actually fired upon her. "Remarkable," she whispered. "You're actually not afraid." "Oh, I'm terrified," Lisa admitted, already charging up for another shot. But being afraid isn't the same as being a coward. The Queen's smile widened. I see why your species troubled the galaxy so much before your apparent extinction. Very well, little human. You wish to dance with death? Let us dance. What followed was perhaps the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Lisa's weapons could barely scratch the Queen's supernatural defenses, while Sithara's every casual gesture sent devastating waves of force that shattered bulkheads and twisted metal, like paper. But Lisa didn't run. When her plasma carbine overheated, she drew her sidearm. When that ran out of charge, she grabbed a Zephyrian shock spear from the deck. When the spear shattered against the Queen's skin, she pulled out her combat knife, a simple steel blade that her grandfather had carried during the old Terran Wars. Why? Queen Sithara demanded as she effortlessly caught Lisa's wrist, stopping the knife inches from her throat. Why do you persist? You cannot win. You cannot even harm me. Why not run like the others? Lisa looked up into those ancient, terrible eyes with her own brown ones, human eyes filled with stubborn, irrational hope. Because, she gasped through the Queen's crushing grip, someone needs to remind you that not everyone in this universe is willing to kneel. For a long moment they stayed frozen like that, the ancient predator and the insignificant human, locked in a contest of wills that transcended the physical. Then impossibly, Queen Sithara began to laugh. Not the cruel, mocking sound from before, but something that almost resembled genuine delight. You know what, little human? She said, releasing Lisa's wrist. I think I shall let you live. Consider it professional courtesy. One apex predator to another. She turned and walked back toward the shadows from whence she came, her footsteps leaving trails of frost that slowly melted in her wake. Tell your kind, if any others truly survive, that Sithara the Undying remembers when mortals had spines. Perhaps this universe isn't quite as boring as I thought. And with that, she vanished, leaving Lisa alone in the corridor, surrounded by the abandoned weapons of a dozen species who had chosen to run rather than stand. In the distance, she could hear the evacuation alarms finally falling silent. Soon, rescue ships would arrive to find Station Omega-7 mysteriously intact, its sole human survivor standing guard over the weapons of beings who had forgotten what courage looked like. The galaxy would remember this day not as the victory of humanity's weapons, but as the triumph of humanity's spirit, the simple, irrational refusal to kneel before impossible odds.